We're live.
Are we?
Yeah, I see it up here in the little corner.
On my thing, it still says preparing. So either we're live or we're preparing. Now we're live, I think. Well, I hope we are. Um, all right. Well, welcome to our first live. Is this technically a webinar? Webinar.
Yeah, I don't know that I would call it a webinar, but it's
Town
a,
hall.
yeah, sure. We can call it a town hall since we can't actually go into any town halls right now.
Yeah,
Sure.
or we can just call it a conversation. How about that? So most of you, if you're on this page, you probably already know me. I am Dana Barrett, and I am running for U.S. Congress in Georgia's 11th district. And I am a former talk radio host. So going live is a little different now than it was when I was on the radio. Um, but it's always good to have a partner in crime when you go live, which is why I have invited my campaign manager, Preston, to join us. So I just have been I've had a lot on my mind, Preston. A lot I want to talk about.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we talk every day, so I know, and I know you've been campaigning for a while, and I know you used to love to get into conversations with people you just met, and they would ask you a question on an issue, and I would know that if we leave you with that person long enough, you would get them over to your side. So while we can't do that now because you're staying at home and I'm staying at home, this is kind of our impromptu version of trying to at least open the door for people, let them know that you're still trying to have those conversations, even if it has to be over the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you're right. I mean, there's two different sort of communication modes that I'm very comfortable with. One was the being on the air every day, thinking about national issues, talking about national issues, and doing it from this perspective of not only sharing my opinion, but sort of bringing facts out that maybe people hadn't heard or details that people hadn't thought about. And then the other mode was what was happening at the beginning of the campaign before we were in lockdown because of the pandemic, which was going out and meeting people at events, big events, small events. And to your point, I have half joked, that if I could talk to every single voter in my district, I am sure that I would win this election. Not because I'm such a great talker, but because I'm actually a good listener. And, I think the idea from my perspective on that sort of half joke is just that if you actually talk to people and sort of ask about what they're experiencing and learn about them, and then share what you're thinking, and that's how you sort of grow, first of all, as a human being, but it's also how you get to good decision making, to get as much fact as you can, to understand the people that you're representing in this case the best you can. So I wish I could do that, but alas, that's a lot of people. So this sort of seemed like a good happy medium where we could talk on Facebook, and if we rip the band-aid off as we're doing today and went live, if people are on and listening, they can ask questions and we'll try to answer them. And we can also answer questions at people who are watching this later and are typing questions into the comments. And I think we're, at least right now, tentatively planning to do these frequently between now and the election. And so if someone asks a question today after we're not live anymore, we can answer it next time. So that's some of our goal. But I have to say, the reason that I wanted to rip the Band-Aid off today is because when I was watching the news this morning, I was watching the story about John Lewis and President Trump, Congressman Lewis and President Trump. And the story, if you didn't see it, was essentially that President Trump did not really offer his condolences on the passing of John Lewis, and he really resisted in an interview that went public yesterday. I believe it was an Axios interview. He wouldn't even praise this civil rights hero. And it was for the pettiest of all reasons, that John Lewis did not attend his inauguration. And I just thought to myself, that is not what a leader does. That is not what a leader does. And you might think, well, of all the things, why is this the one thing I want to talk about? How he responded to John Lewis's death? It's emblematic in my mind of Trump's leadership across the board. It's petty and it's childish, and you know, it's just emblematic of the kind of leader he isn't. Because he's not a leader. Putting Donald Trump and leader in the same sentence is just not even, they don't even belong in the same room, let alone the same sentence.
So there's a lot of people in positions of leadership right now that kind of go along with this sometimes, though. I mean, he proposes something like delaying the election, and then immediately there's a whole subset of people in DC now that will twist their own brains to try and figure out what he was actually trying to say, or what that, what that could mean down the road. Like, how did we get to this point where our leaders are now falling into the two columns that we've set up for them and like not budging at all?
Well, I think I would like to say this whole thing is Donald Trump's fault, but it's really not. I mean, the truth of the matter is Donald Trump becoming president of this country is not where the problems began. His presidency is a symptom, a big bad one, but nonetheless a symptom of a problem that's technically been brewing, I think, in this country for a very long time. And, from my perspective, and, I don't know if everyone has really thought about this way, but I think it is becoming more and more clear that we have abdicated our responsibility to elect leaders for the right reasons. We've gotten, I don't know, and by the way, I've done it too. So I'm not criticizing everybody else without taking my part in this. We've gotten lazy, too busy, swayed by the media, swayed by commercials, whatever it is. And we have been electing our leaders for many, many years based on whether they have a D or an R next to their name, or perhaps it's for a single issue. And it could be on both sides, right? Whether you're, pro-choice or not, you are going to only vote for the guy who believes that one thing, or the woman who believes that one thing, and you're not even going to examine the rest of the qualities that person brings to the table as a potential leader. And so, from my perspective, what ends up happening is when we come across a new situation, we end up with a group of people who don't have the capacity to solve that problem, because we didn't ask if they were a good problem solver. We didn't ask, how smart they were. We didn't ask what their values were. We didn't ask, what else they believed in. We didn't try to determine if they were a good listener. All we did was pick a box. Okay, they believe in my one issue, or okay, they're a D or an R, and that's who we chose. And then we come along, 2020, pandemic. We have a group of people, and certainly the administration, the Trump administration, and those that are sort of following in his wake on this, we're not prepared to handle this. And so it's been frustrating me for months now, since all this began, that people aren't acknowledging that aspect of it, that our leaders across the board were not prepared to handle this, because we did not ask the right questions when we were hiring them for the jobs they have.
So I want to spring a question on you, and we did not really talk about this beforehand, but in the conversations I have on this topic with a lot of people, they kind of confuse or conflate the ideas between being a good leader and being bipartisan. And I think, what talking about John Lewis shows us, and John Lewis certainly, I think, had a lot of respect for people across the aisle, but we have kind of lost this idea that when he was fighting for what he was fighting for, which was his entire life, a lot of times he was quite lonely on his own side of the aisle, and fighting against a very large and very powerful establishment. So how do you, in your vision of what it takes to be a good leader, kind of work in bipartisanship while also having a strong, ethical center on some things that you may not be willing to compromise on?
Right. I mean, look, I think being a good leader is knowing when you compromise and when you don't, right? So if you take a John McCain as an example, by the way, another man who recently passed, who was disrespected by President Trump because John McCain did not agree with everything Trump wanted. So there was that pettiness again directed at his own party even. But John McCain is a classic example. There were times And the only reason I'm not giving an example from John Lewis's life is because I just don't have one off the top of my head. But, you know, John McCain clearly stuck to his side when that was the right thing to do, and also said no to his side when that was the right thing to do. That is a genuine leader. You know, and so, yes, there is some, in my mind, there is, and it is important to work across the aisle. And it is important to be a unifier. One of the biggest issues I have, and one of the reasons I decided to get into this run for office, is that very little actually gets done in Washington. And part of the reason is that divide of I'm on the R team and we do X no matter whether right or wrong. I'm on the D team and we do X no matter right or wrong. And we have to be able to listen to each other and compromise. I don't understand when that became a dirty word. Like, I think first graders are now getting in trouble for saying compromise in school. Like, how did that happen? Like, weren't we all taught growing up to learn how to share and compromise with our siblings and with our, you know, the other kids at school, because that's how you get along. And yet our leaders, the people that are supposed to be the best at leading, can't even compromise. Right now, today, we are, you know, without the stimulus that has protected people through this pandemic, because the two sides cannot come to an agreement. And who should be unifying them? The president. And what has he done? Sidelined himself. Name called. You know, he's out there right now calling Nancy Pelosi crazy Nancy, instead of saying, let's all sit down and have a conversation and figure out how we can get the people what they need. Until we start electing people for the right reasons, and examining what does it really mean to be a leader, we're never going to get ourselves out of this. We're just not.
So it sounds like, you know, in some of the instances that we brought up as examples, a unifying thread, at least in my mind, even for leaders that I respected but constantly disagreed with, is that you had a good understanding of who they were and where they were. And they weren't going to waver because of, you know, social pressure or partisan pressure, whatever it is. So it sounds like a solution to this is public accountability to some extent. I mean, what do you think the next generation of leaders needs to look like for us to get kind of beyond this constant frustration where things are just kind of genuinely broken?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, that's a big question. Because
yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, go ahead and solve everything wrong with the United States in, I don't know, 10 seconds. Yeah, go for it.
I got you. Look, I mean, I think there's, and this is why when I was doing my radio show, I would constantly start at a big topic like leadership, and I would end up winding my way back to campaign finance reform, and no, seriously, and you know, electoral reform, because at the end of the day, the system doesn't support us getting the best leaders in place. The system is currently rigged. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it is, if you really dig in, the system is rigged toward the incumbents. It is rigged toward wealthier people running for office. It is rigged toward, you know, connected people winning seats in these various roles. And all of that could be leveled pretty easily, really, if we would get behind it. The problem with that issue always is it's not super sexy. And by the way, one of the reasons you hear very little about it is because the media will never cover campaign finance reform. Want to know why? Do you want to take a guess, Preston?
Enlighten me.
The media will never cover campaign finance reform because the biggest beneficiary of these outrageously expensive campaigns is the media. That's where all the money goes. It goes to the media. So why are they ever going to make you, the citizens, aware of how crazy it is?
And just to add to that, if all the money goes to them, the rest goes to people like me who tell you what the important issues are to the voters. And if my job depends on you having a lot of money in your campaign pockets, then I'm never going to tell you to talk about campaign finance reform.
Well, there you go. There you go. And that is, but because I'm a person who's gotten into this, not because I have some, you know, wish to be a king, but because I want to make real change in this country. I don't care if you like it or not. Preston, and I don't care if the media wants to cover it or not. The reality is we have to change some of this stuff or we will never get the right people. And since we can't do that overnight, and we're certainly not going to do that before November, what we can do, each of us, is stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to take the extra half an hour or an hour or whatever it is to do the investigation into these different campaigns and into these candidates, and I'm going to ask who they are, what they're about, and if I don't see it online, I'm going to ask. I'm going to write in a question, or I'm going to go on social media. I'm going to read, learn, and try to understand, and not just choose a D or an R, not just choose one issue, but to say, does this person have the qualities that I think we need when the next pandemic, the next issue, whatever it is, bubbles up to the surface that we weren't expecting. And to me, that gets back to that leadership question. What does real leadership look like? The ability to listen, the ability to lead by example, the ability to unify people, the ability to delegate, to make decisions quickly and efficiently, right? There's a lot of different characteristics that make a good leader. Are we looking for those? Are we asking the right questions to really make those choices when we're ticking a box in the voting booth or on the absentee ballot?
So I know we're going to do a bunch of these. I'll plug again, anybody who's watching and wants to post a question in the comments, feel free. We'll probably end up getting to it next time at this point, or we can answer it privately. I would not be doing my job if I didn't ask you to plug both maybe the campaign website and maybe what we need from people right now if they want to find a way to support the campaign.
Oh, well, a shameless self-plug. I've always been a fan of those. I'm happy to do it. So yeah, if you're kind of catching this video and this is the first time you're getting exposed to our campaign, you can certainly learn more at our website, which is electdanabarrett.com. If you're on our Facebook page here watching, you can like our Facebook page if you haven't already done that. Follow us on social media. Obviously, the campaign always needs money, so if you want to give us a little contribution, we'll happily take that. We're also building a digital street team right now because we're grassroots. We are not one of those races that is, the sweetheart race where everybody's just pouring millions of dollars into it. That's not where we are. We are all about grassroots, and grassroots today, because of the coronavirus, is pretty much all digital. So we're building this digital street team to help us get the word out online. And if that's something you'd be interested in, just go onto our Facebook page or onto our website, and there's places where you can sign up. And yeah, we're going to do these regularly. So if there's issues you want us to talk about, let us know and we'll get them in the lineup. Thank you all.